Warp in 3, 2, 1.
Alright, computer. Let's hook up to the local GNet and let's get this going.
Initiating connection to Jupiter GNet Hub. Connection to Jupiter GNet Hub established.
Okay, computer. Open up comms to all our viewers and begin transmitting our latest file.
Transmitting. John and the spaceboat. Stargazer.
The evening sky was crystal clear, and John set his holocam to record more star footage. Just after one casual adjustment, his device was able to pick up even the small starships orbiting Omia. Some left glittering trails of drive plasma, others simply drifted, waiting for either a landing clearance or their buddies to dock with them. Even with the distance being so great, he could differentiate the difference between the types of vessels. Winged shuttles or dropships, small cargo or passenger craft. He could even see a dozen or so starfighters and strike crafts, which slowly flew around, probably following their patrol routes. The small space station, docked in geosynchronous orbit over Applecrate, was an outpost of modular design, which belonged to one of the local merc companies, Cerberus. They were the first Terran mercs who set up shop here with the intent of protecting this colony and had so far greatly expanded their operation. John did not dock with their outpost for one simple reason. He wasn't a sea logger. Many others had already visited Omia Prime and interviewed most Cerberus commanders, lived in the barracks on the surface, some even trained together with their star troopers. Yet, it was the ground beneath his feet, the everyday activities of the ordinary people he was most interested in. He breathed in the crystal clean, crisp evening air and smiled. Just as on any other world where Terrans lived, nothing was disturbed or polluted. Technology allowed even the most ravaged by interstellar war planets to be restored, and many terraforming corporations made their employees plenty of money by cleaning or outright restoring various environments. One of the reasons why Terrans employed thermonuclear weapons against their genocidal, enslaving enemies was that radiation could be easily cleaned up after the conflict ended. Yet, before such eco-friendly tech existed, humans have long since learned how to take only what they needed and employ technology to produce amenities, while spending less energy and resources in the process. John, Eve, and Malcolm now sat next to a fire made of dry twigs. The fishies they caught earlier now roasted, splayed on a couple of long, flat river stones. The rocks acted as an improvised baking stove, and their platters were ordinary vac foam bags. Inside, they put some wild vegetables and a bit of salt, which was plenty enough to turn these fish into a gourmet meal. The meat was succulent, juicy, and incredibly tasty without being overly full of tiny bones. Indeed, the river critters fought their would-be catchers fiercely. It took the three of them over 2 hours of intense chasing around this part of the river, but in the end, they prevailed. It was an experience which John, even a mildly skilled in survival Terran, was a bit stunned by. After gutting and cleaning the critters, they quickly found an empty campsite on the riverbank, which even had an already built fireplace. They only had to gather some dry wood and then make a fire. John quickly remembered his days in the Star Scouts because Malcolm made a kindling and used not some elaborate electrical device, but a stone and metal rod combo. Why waste precious power packs or other stuff when you could easily make fire with the simplest of items? What's more important, by using dried twigs and chopped dead trees to pieces, they made sure natural forest fires only started in the deep woods. In almost complete silence, they feasted one fish for each of them, and John could swear that even the critter's size was surprisingly close to what they could eat. Before the fish started sizzling over the stone, Malcolm produced a big clay bottle filled with white wine and metal cups, which they washed in the river before their host filled them to the brim with the aromatic liquid. The stones they baked their fish on were tumbled inside the crystal clear waters, which the nearby factory committed to cleaning from mud and animal corpses. Perhaps there existed FTL-capable civilizations where industry still polluted the environment. John was unsure of this even being true, since after all his years of travel, he'd seen none of this inside Minarchy space. What bones were left of their fishies they broke and then baked over the open fire. Once an animal was dead, Terrans consumed everything and threw away nothing. The fish we take good care of. Local farmers feed them with leftover produce and grain. The kids come over to the river and pet and swim with them, and then, when time comes, I am told which ones are ready to be fished, calmly spoke Malcolm after sipping more wine from his cup. You just described the circle of nature, Mr. Malcolm, but things are quite different here, if I may say so myself. John ate his last piece of baked fish bone and licked his lips. Not only did the fish taste unbelievably, but he felt like the alien environment was more in balance with the Terran colonists here than on most planets he'd been. He heard tales of Corolla and its walking trees, but that place was off limits for now. Ever willing to invade, the forces of the Tazarian Imperium lurked too close for comfort. Corolla's local settlement, Murphy's Landing, got wiped out completely 2 years ago. Now, after that terrible episode ended, there were only ruins left where the tiny hamlet once stood. Most famed Terran net-stationalites posted information on their GNet profiles condemning the attack, which nearby colonies were unable to counter on time. People claim that the Tarzarians, ever willing to expand their territory and influence by aggressive means, wanted the planet as a forward base. The invaders were promptly and soundly defeated soon after they quote-unquote conquered Corolla, of course. Colonial Navy ships from neighboring colonies formed a strike force and took good permanent care of the invader. However, the Tarzarian Imperium was a huge star state, and its forces many times more numerous than what Terrans could gather. Thankfully, at least to John's knowledge, this conflict did not escalate or spread further away from this star system, which meant it was not officially authorized by their higher power that yet another Tarzarian commander got too ambitious for his or her own good. Their leadership did not care much about these parts. French space was the forgotten, overgrown with useless weeds border of the Imperium. Even if one of their border counts acted on his or her own, in an overly ambitious attempt to gain more power and influence in the royal court, nobody would care if said count lost. Moreover, John knew for a fact that the Tazarians were embroiled in 2 wars, which meant that realistically, they wouldn't want to start a new one. Perhaps, once the tension were over and the dangers gone, Corolla's colonists and their friends would return. Indeed, that planet's unique ecosystem was more than beautiful. It was yet another mystery. Another one of the many he was sure that someday someone could unravel. That's why he visited Apple Crate first. After all, one too many of his friends on GNet and a couple million subscribers consistently begged him to come here. Visit Omia Prime, John, they said. See the harvest fair. Enjoy the tasty food, they said. Be on the lookout for mysteries, they said. And H-Logger was wise to listen to his subscribers, for they, more often than not, knew things he or she didn't. That and the odd insightful comment he got while streaming on GNet, oftentimes John was startled by how much some of his subscribers knew. They were always civil, though, and they had plenty of moderators to help him. Sifting through millions of comments wasn't a joke. Well, what do you think the fishy's deal is? I mean, we Terrans always try not to wreck everything around us and take only what we need to survive. Only a fool would disrupt the order of things, and especially if said order did not constantly try to kill you, chuckled Mr. Malcolm while Eve sipped more of her wine and nodded with a huge grin on her snout. So this is where that sly bunny got most of her wisdom, huh? Appropriate. Most appropriate. Whenever John imagined some wise old sage in their free time, somehow fishing was the most prevalent activity they were engaged in. I have absolutely no idea, mumbled confused John. Entertain us, young man. Malcolm refilled their glasses with more of the aromatic wine and smiled. We have plenty of time and the night is still young. What I have for you are my own personal theories, mere assumptions and speculations. John looked at Eve and began to wonder if most people in the know around here were close to Amy or this mysterious fisherman. He sipped more wine and cleared his throat, then spoke. Since I don't have all the facts, my best guess is that the local critters are telepathic to some extent. That certainly explains why neither the fish nor those six-legged cat-looking animals in the forest have eyes or ears. Not sure, but to me, this is the most scientific and logical explanation. John's gaze wandered off as he spoke and again examined one distant cluster of shiny, gently blinking stars. This was the Olean Pale constellation, the place where the race called the Oleans came from. Just as once, long ago, the Killera were entertained beyond measure after they learned of Earth's felines and observed the easily noticeable similarities between them. Oleans felt the same. He chuckled, and that somehow broke the seriousness of which he delivered his hypothesis. The Oleans looked very much like otters, although of human size and without whiskers. Strange and mysterious the galaxy was, full of amazing creatures, places so beautiful you could explore them with tears in your eyes. There were plenty of danger, too, and one part of him craved learning more of this planet's secrets. Therefore, his theory wasn't in any way outlandish or illogical, and he saw his host exchange smiles with Eve. I will say this, John. You are correct to a certain extent. Though to share the secret is not my decision to make. Malcolm's eyes studied the forest for a few seconds before he continued. What I think you and some of your spiritually inclined subscribers will appreciate is the following. There exists a force around here which aids those who's proven that they respect the planet, cryptically stated the old fisherman. So, you are not a telepath? Asked stunned John, while his gaze darted between Malcolm and Eve. Me? No, I'm just one simple old fisherman who spent most of his life trying to understand the universe of ours. The man looked at Apple Crate's lights and slowly stood up. But we can always have a long chat about religion and the nature of existence later. If Amy finds out that I've been bothering you with my boring old stories, she'd be real mad. Now, Eve, please guide our guest back to his starship. Nothing beats a good night's sleep.
Okay, computer, that's it. Disconnect from the GNet and set course for Omnia Prime.
Disconnecting GNet. Setting course. Omnia Prime. Spooling engines now. Initiating. Jumping in 3, 2, 1.